When families face emergencies and are driven from their homes, they need access to emergency facilities like any other citizen. Families should be allowed to stay together during crises. However, a new bill proposed by Nancy Mace, a former South Carolina state representative who is now a U.S. congresswoman, seeks to deny this fundamental right to families with a member on a state's sex offense registry. While protecting vulnerable populations is a goal we all share, this bill fails to achieve that and instead imposes unnecessary harm. Mace's legislation, the Safe Shelters Act, states, except for the purpose of seeking information on designated shelters, a covered sex offender may not enter or use the services of an undesignated shelter. Under the proposed bill, designated shelters, as determined by FEMA, would likely include federal buildings or prisons deemed suitable for registrants by the General Services Administration. This bill is cruel and unfairly targets registrants with families, particularly those with small children. Non-registered spouses depend on their partners for help and support during emergencies, and registered single parents would be forced to choose between their children's safety and forced separation. We believe that requiring families to separate during a crisis is contemptible. People on the registry already face ostracization and discrimination in daily life. Denying them access to emergency shelters further marginalizes them and interferes with the fundamental unit of society, the family. No family should have to endure such treatment during a crisis. This bill is unnecessary as there is no evidence that registrants pose a threat to the safety of others in emergency shelters. Shelter operators and agencies are not advocating for such extreme measures. Instead, this bill appears to be a political maneuver, either for publicity or personal agenda, addressing a problem that does not exist. Ironically, the bill comes from lawmakers who champion limiting government and federal interference in state matters. This legislation contradicts those principles by overstepping states' rights, a fundamental conservative value. The Safe Shelters Act undermines this principle because local governments typically manage emergency shelters, and some states have chosen to legislate these matters themselves. The bill overrides state and local authority, imposing unnecessary federal control. This is bad public policy on all fronts, as it harms families by forcing separation during emergencies. It solves a problem that does not exist, wasting legislative resources. Finally, it violates states' rights and local jurisdiction over shelter management. The National Association for Rational Sexual Offense Laws monitors such legislation and recently called attention to problems around these kinds of laws in states like Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina during recent hurricanes Helene and Milton, stating, when safety is threatened, when families are driven from their homes, they need to be allowed emergency shelter, just like every other citizen, and they need to be allowed to stay together as families. Narsel noted several families electing to stay home during mandatory evacuations rather than separating parents from children, putting entire families in danger. This flawed, unnecessary, and potentially unconstitutional legislation must not become law. Instead of dividing families during crises, policymakers should focus on solutions that equitably support all citizens.